Would you volunteer for a Dad's Army style home guard to protect the UK against attacks? You know the number 0207 862 2222. Just to be clear, the government wants to create a citizens' army to safeguard the country's important sites. That's our nuclear power plants, telecommunications networks and major airports. It would be made up of 7,000, this is a key word, 7,000 volunteers, and would be modelled on a citizens' militia, which was created in the 1940s when Britain faced the prospect of invasion by Nazi Germany during the Second World War. And of course, it was inspired by that classic sitcom, Dad's Army. Let's just have a look.
You don't mind, sir? You did want them to be looked at by the film people?
Yes, I did, James, thank you.
The platoon do look all right to be looked at by the film people, don't they, sir?
Yes, all right. Just as long as they get an all-round picture of the platoon.
Very good, sir, very good, sir. Platoon, up out, head! Up out, head! Up out, head!
What are you doing?
Well, you said you wanted an all-round picture, sir.
Oh, really, James? Platoon, about turn.
Well, who do you think you're kidding, Mr. Hitler, or who do you think you're kidding, Mr. Starmer? I mean, that looks pretty chaotic. So do we need experts? I mean, these sorts of jobs, this is our critical infrastructure. I'm going to go to you first, Annabel. Would you volunteer to put your life on the line protecting our very important infrastructure?
Well, I'm not really sure it's ever going to come to that. I'd be very surprised if this plan ever sees light of day. You know, they say that a camel is a horse designed by a committee. This is a manatee designed by the Bright Sparks in Whitehall. I just don't believe that this plan has been properly thought through. And, you know, two things really stand out to me. First, is our critical infrastructure really in such peril? Are we really at such risk of some sort of cyber attack, of terrorist attack, that it's deemed necessary to have this Dad's Army style collection of volunteers protecting it? And if it is, then surely the government needs to be doing more than a home guard. So I think, you know, that's one big problem. And the second is, you know, the devil is going to be in the detail here. You know, how are these people who are not trained going to be trained up to a professional level? But you know, counter-terrorism officers, for instance, require an enormous amount of training. These are real specialists in a very narrow area of our defence. And how will it all interact with local authorities? How will it interact with the police, who presumably already sit as their duty to protect things like nuclear power stations? So I just don't think
Henry,
this is
it's about volunteerism, taking perhaps a role in your local community. And, you know, above all else, I mean, during the Second World War, the East Lothian Home Guard was made up of farmers and gamekeepers because they knew the area well.
Absolutely, but I mean, the jobs were very, very clear, you know, in bomb disposal, artillery, spotting, the whole range. And that's why 1.7 million people engaged and got involved in the Home Guard. I mean, any future war, any future threat is going to be much more high-tech, and it's going to require a different range of skills. So I don't personally think I have the kind of skills that any defence ministry would want. But if I were brilliant at hacking, for example, if I were brilliant at jamming, if I had the kind of fantastic futuristic skills that some of the people who are spending all their time on their computers might have, then they could help civil defence. They could help against the drone invasion.
They're not talking about futuristic skills. What they're saying is, look, we don't have the manpower or the funds to police these critical areas. There was a fire at Heathrow. If there'd been more people around, you know, who'd been trained effectively as upmarket security guards, let's say, this wouldn't have happened. So why is that necessarily a bad thing, Annabel?
Well, I mean, can you see how it would play out in practice? You'd have some people who are pretty clueless even after what I imagine will be a short period of training. You might have some people who see themselves as modern-day vigilantes and take it way too far, perhaps not cooperating as they should be with the local police forces and those who are already in place to protect these sorts of areas. You know, so I just don't see how it's going to function in reality. And to my point before, you know, if we are in a situation now where these important points, infrastructure points, are coming under under threat from, let's say, China or Russia, foreign hostile states, then the UK government ought to be doing something about that. And yet all we're getting is an increase in our defence spending to 2.5% of GDP, which is completely inadequate. We need to get ourselves on a path to 3% of GDP. We're not funding our police properly. There are big, difficult decisions.
Well, let me take
that
you
the
up on
government
that
needs to make.
about the police. I mean, the police are assisted by special constables, right, who make an enormous difference if you speak to police services. Those are people who volunteer in their communities because they feel that they have a stake in their communities. It's not have-a-go heroism. They're adequately trained, and also they can be a real benefit to say the very least, as I would absolutely agree with you, an underfunded police who, frankly, need the assistance. Right?
Although I think the special constables have, although they've got a fine and noble history, their numbers have been swamped by the police and community support officers who are not fully fledged police officers, but they do have a range of skills.
Yeah, but they're paid.
And they're paid and they're salaried. But they're kind of doing the kind of work that special constables used to do, unpaid, because you're going to get far more people to do the job paid and as a career than unpaid. But I was just thinking about some of the other potential jobs that could be done. We're worried about Russians, for example, deep sea cables, sabotage. We've got a lot of trawler men and women, people in the fisheries industry who have been nobbled by, you might say, our Brexit freedoms because they can't sell into Europe. What about if they use some of their radar and some of their tech to monitor the North Sea, monitor our channels on behalf of the nation?
Well, I think that's still sort of happening by our anti-terrorist and
but if we don't have enough people doing
our
it,
anti-war capability.
maybe.
I'm not sure.
I think fishermen are quite busy.
Yeah.
Henry.
Well, a lot of them can't. Well, a lot of them sadly are not busy as they want to be.
Idea, perhaps the defence secretary.
I want to throw that out there.
Perhaps the defence secretary, whoever it is this week, is listening to you. Jane from Exeter, what's your view? Are you going to join Dad's army?
Good morning, my darling. Yes, but I'm going to call it a mum's army because I'm a woman. I don't have a problem with my identity.
That's good.
And women are very good at diffusing things.
Well, that's good. So you would stand, would you, with your fellow Mum's Army volunteers in front of our nuclear power plants? But help me, why do you think it would be a good idea? What we're actually talking about is, say, look, we need to increase the capability of our security around our key infrastructure sites. There isn't necessarily the money to do it. This would be a really good way of getting people to volunteer, feel like they've got a stake in protecting the nation. That can only be a good thing. Is that what would motivate you, other than, it sounds to me, than, well, becoming, G.I. Jane from Exeter?
Well, yes. I mean, more the merrier with anything in life, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it depends, as Annabel says, if they're adequately trained.
Well, yeah.
But it's certainly good to hear from you down in Exeter. Ursula, you're in Hertfordshire. We've heard from Jane. Are you going to be part of the Mum's Army?
Yeah, well, no. When I was very young, I'm now in my 90s, during the war, I witnessed the training of local men into Dad's army. Right. And it was absolutely, even though I was only a child then, it was hilarious. The army came onto Boxmoor Moor in Hertfordshire, and they were supposed to train the local blokes. And I remember my father just standing there. He had no idea what was going on, and it was mayhem. And then there were also very young men waiting to go into the forces. And to be honest, I think it's utterly ridiculous, because to protect us against the enemy, the sort of stuff you have to put up with nowadays, you need highly qualified people.
Well, I have to say, first of all, it's a pleasure to hear from you, not least because you've got actual memory of the training. I think here, I suspect what they're talking about is training the volunteers to an adequate standard. But it's really about, I suppose, to some extent, would you place yourself on behalf of the nation as a volunteer in danger to protect our key infrastructure? Or is this really about the government saying we've run out of money and we just need people to put their best foot forward as they did in the Second World War? Graham, do you think this is a good idea? You're up in Glasgow.
Yes, I think it is. Good morning.
Morning, Graham.
I think a lot of veterans would quite happily do that, especially the older ones. They'd be happy to do something like that, and then you're getting a highly trained workforce already.
Well, the thing about that, Graham, is that haven't they already served? And it seems to me this is people who are offering to place themselves in danger purely, well, because they want to protect the nation. This is about people that haven't necessarily considered putting their life on the line, Graham.
I understand that, but I honestly think when ex-forces go into civic state, there's not a lot for them to do, and they find it hard to integrate. So some of this would be good for their mental health, and obviously you're getting a very highly trained workforce.
Well, I hear you on that one, and perhaps they're listening to this, although Annabel is sceptical this is ever going to see the light of day. Although you make a really important point, Graham, and I hope that there are ex-veterans or veterans listening to the show this morning, because they are, to say the least, not served as well as they should be in this country. And often, as you're, I think, highlighting, when they leave the army, they often really struggle to transition back into civilian life, and they are not given the adequate care and help that they need. And as you'll be aware, Graham, a number of people who find themselves unhoused and homeless in our country are people who have risked their lives on our behalf. So I'm grateful you make that point. Annabel, this is an interesting one. I mean, I quite like the idea of Mum's Army. I suspect, Jane is probably right. A number of mums standing in front of our key infrastructure would deter certainly some people. I think, given the way Jane sounds, Vladimir Putin would have a second thought.
Yes, exactly. The axis of authoritarian evil is no match for some of the mums of Britain who would join arms outside our key infrastructure sites. No, absolutely, of course, we should have equality across our armed forces, allowing women to participate just as men do. It's in the bulk of the armed forces. I think there's some areas where I'm afraid, and I know this is controversial to say, but women simply aren't as physically strong as men, and that ought to be factored in. Well, nevertheless, of course it should be a dad's and a mum's army if the government does press ahead with this scheme.
Yeah, but you're pretty sceptical. You think this is unlikely to happen. Who knows? I mean, it seems to me that it's plausible. Robert, in South Yorkshire, what a great name you've got. What do you think?
Yeah, thanks, Judge Rayner.
Sorry. Nice to see you. Well, nice to watch. I could only hear you. What do you think? Are you going to volunteer over in South Yorkshire?
Yes, I would.
And why?
Because I know I don't need training to do the job.
You don't need training. You think that you're already sufficiently trained to protect our nation's nuclear assets? Why is that?
Yeah, because I know what I'm looking out for. I know what I'm looking out for.
Oh, just pause for a second. The government might be listening. Perhaps you're going to do their training package. What you're looking out for? You're standing in front of a nuclear power plant. You've got your binoculars. You've got all your tools. What exactly should they be looking out for?
Yeah, terrorists. Like
what do they look like?
Normal people.
Right.
You stop and search everybody. You even include diplomatic community people. You stop and search their vehicles.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I suspect that would be included.
In this country,
but Robert, what does a terrorist look like? Help me. There you are, standing, trying to.
What does a terrorist look like?
Yeah.
Could be anybody, mate. Could be anybody.
Yeah, that's right. So you would volunteer, Robert, it seems to me, and you think this is a rather good idea. Do you think there's lots of Roberts in the country that are prepared to risk potentially their lives for free to ensure that we can keep our lights on? Or should the government be paying for it?
Well, if the government done their job correctly,
right,
we wouldn't need all this security business around England, would we?
Well, that's precisely what Annabel and lots of other people are saying. It's why we don't know whether this is going to happen. But if it does, it's good to know that you're there. And no doubt the government are listening, and you might get a tap. Who knows? If you don't tell anybody you're applying, you could be the next James Bond, Robert. You certainly know what a terrorist looks like, and stop and search is just as good as offering them a martini. So thanks for calling.